Okay, so you guys really want to go down a dark road with this one, huh? This deep dive into the BTK killer, Dennis Rader. I gotta admit, there's just something about this case, a man living a double life for decades, hiding in plain sight. I
Wow.
don't know.
This really gets under your skin, right?
It does. It really does. It's one of those cases that forces us to confront that darkness that can be lurking right beneath the surface, like in those seemingly ordinary lives. And Wichita, Kansas, from like 1974 to 1991, a whole city held captive by fear. And they had no idea the monster they were hunting was living right among them the whole time.
Living among them. Yeah, he was a church leader, a Boy Scout volunteer, like the guy next door. But all those years, he was living this totally double life and leaving behind all those cryptic clues and the taunting letters. I mean, it's like something straight out of a movie, like a psychological thriller.
Totally. And that's really what's so fascinating about this case. And disturbing, it's the psychology of it. Like, how can someone compartmentalize like that? How do you separate those two sides of yourself so effectively? And we see it in other cases too, right? With these criminals who manage to live what seem like totally normal lives, but then they're committing these horrific acts. I mean, it makes you wonder, right? How well can we ever really know anyone?
It's a chilling thought, for sure. So, let's go back, let's rewind a bit, back to Rader's early life. I mean, were there any hints, anything at all that, looking back, might have foreshadowed what was to come? Like any cracks in that facade?
Well, yeah, there were actually.
Yeah.
Some really disturbing signs early on. I mean, there were reports saying Rader was cruel to animals when he was a child. And that's a classic sign, right? Lack of empathy. And something that's been observed in a lot of serial killers, like a twisted preview of what's to come.
Yeah, like a twisted preview. And then, 1974, the nightmare begins. The Otero family murders. A husband and wife. Their 2 young children. BTK. Bind, torture, kill. The acronym it would become synonymous with terror in Wichita. So what about those killings? Those first killings, what can you tell us about
Oh,
that?
the Atar family murders, that was Rader's terrifying debut. He got into their home, he tied them all up, and then he subjected the parents to this psychological torture. He even made them watch him, pretend to abuse their own kids before he killed each of them one by one. I mean, the level of cruelty, calculated cruelty, the need for control, inflicting that much pain. I mean, that became like a hallmark of his MO.
God, it's hard to even imagine that,
Yeah.
that level of
Yeah.
depravity. And then on top of that, it's like that need for control. It seems like it went beyond just the crimes themselves. Like he was playing this macabre game
Yeah.
of cat and mouse.
With the police.
Uh,
And with the media. Oh, absolutely. He wanted the attention. He craved it. He wanted the notoriety. I mean, he was sending letters to the police, to the newspapers in Wichita, taunting them, giving them details of his crimes. He even suggested nicknames for himself. The BTK Strangler was one. I mean, can you imagine? How chilling would that be to receive one of those letters? To know that this predator was still out there.
yeah, like a spider.
Yeah.
Spinning a web of fear over the entire city.
Exactly. And in one of those letters, it was sent in 74. There's this, God, this is so eerie. He writes, "It's hard to control myself. You probably call me psychotic with sexual perversion hang-up." It's chilling. It's like this disturbing little window into his psyche, this weird blend of self-awareness and, God, arrogance. Like he knew what he was, but he couldn't stop, or he wouldn't.
And the police, I mean, they were totally baffled. Years went by, and the trail just went cold. It's like the BTK killer vanished into thin air. So what happened? What happened during those years of silence?
Well, that silence, that's from like 79 to 86. It's one of the most perplexing parts of this whole case. Some profilers think it might have been, a period of relative stability in Rader's life, maybe because of his marriage, his job, he was a compliance officer, very involved in his church. But, it was a deceptive calm, like a monster just lying dormant, waiting to reemerge. And reemerge, he did. In 86, BTK returned. And he left this chilling message on the car of a potential victim, a woman named Maureen Hedge, who he had been stalking. And he fully intended to kill. I mean, it was terrifying. Like a reminder that the nightmare was far from over.
Yeah, a ghost returning to haunt a city that had been trying so hard to move on. So when he resurfaced, did anything change?
About his method. Well, there's some debate about that, actually. About whether those later crimes, show an escalation in the violence, or if there's like a shift in his motives. Some people point to the fact that he took more risks, like he started targeting victims in broader daylight. Others think that the victims he chose became more, seemingly random. But one thing is clear, I mean, the fear in Wichita, it definitely intensified.
And while everyone was terrified, Rader was still playing those mind games, sending more letters, more clues, drawing the police deeper and deeper into his web.
Oh yeah, it was like he was daring them to catch him, to unravel his cryptic little messages. He loved it. He reveled in the power, the fear he instilled God. He even sent a letter to the Wichita Eagle. That was back in '78. And he outlines his whole BTK story, this chilling narrative of his crimes. It's like he needed that notoriety. He was feeding off of it.
But it couldn't last forever, right? And it was technology, ironically, that ended up being his downfall. So tell me about the floppy disk.
Oh, the floppy disk, right? So in 2004, after another one of his silent periods, BTK decides to resurface again. And he starts communicating with the media again. And in one of his letters, he makes a huge mistake. A fatal error, really. He asks if it's safe to send a message on a floppy disk. He even tries to assure the police, that it can't be traced.
Wait, hold on. He actually thought a floppy disk couldn't be traced. 2004. I mean, come on. That seems incredibly naive for someone who had evaded capture for so long.
Right, it does, doesn't it? I mean, maybe his arrogance just got the best of him, or maybe he really just, totally underestimated how much forensic technology had advanced. But for whatever reason, it was a fatal miscalculation. The police, they played along, they put an ad in the newspaper assuring him that, yeah, a floppy disk would be totally untraceable. And Rader, blinded by his own hubris, he took the bait, hook, line, and sinker.
So he sent the disk. What happened next?
Well, the disk had a message on it, sure. But, more importantly, it had hidden metadata, like a digital fingerprint, and it pointed right back to Dennis Rader. Investigators were able to get the name Dennis from it, and they found a link to the Christ Lutheran Church.
So they were finally closing in.
They were, and when they discovered that the president of the church council was a guy named Dennis Rader, this, seemingly upstanding citizen, and that he drove a black Jeep Cherokee, which had been spotted near some of the crime scenes, they knew they had their man. But they needed more than just circumstantial evidence to make an arrest, They needed irrefutable proof.
And that's where the DNA evidence comes in.
Exactly. So to get Rader's DNA, investigators decided to take it was controversial at the time, but ultimately it was the decisive step. They got a sample from his daughter's medical records. It had been collected during a routine medical procedure at Kansas State University.
So they were able to compare the DNA from the crime scenes with the DNA from his daughter. And that established a familial link.
Exactly. It was a groundbreaking technique at the time, and it was the final nail in Rader's coffin, the DNA match. It was undeniable. They had their man, the monster who had terrorized Wichita for decades, hiding in plain sight the whole time.
And then the arrest. Can you imagine the shock when the community found out that Dennis Rader, this respectable guy, was the BTK killer?
Oh, it was total disbelief. It was like the illusion of safety was just shattered. Here was this man blended seamlessly into society, a husband, a father, a church leader. And all that time, he was harboring this dark, terrible secret. It forced people to question everything. They thought they knew about their neighbors, their community, even themselves.
Well, must have been like a betrayal on a massive scale.
Yeah,
so what about Rader? What was his reaction when the mask finally came off?
So on February 25th, 2005, the police arrested Dennis Rader near his home.
And at first, he played dumb, but once they hit him with the DNA evidence, that facade, it crumbled. He confessed to all 10 murders, and he recounted all those gruesome details with this, chilling matter-of-factness. And did he express any remorse at all? No. Any guilt? For all the pain that he had inflicted?
None. Not a shred. It's like his confession was almost boastful, Like he was reliving all those horrific moments, describing his, meticulous planning, the fear in his victim's eyes, as if you were describing some grand accomplishment. It's a chilling display. The lack of empathy. That defines psychopathy.
Yeah, it's a reminder that evil can wear the most ordinary of faces. So this brings us back to something you mentioned earlier, about the psychology of compartmentalization. How could Rader, for so many years, reconcile these horrific crimes with his seemingly normal life?
Yeah, well, it's a question that psychologists are still, fascinated by and baffled by. Some believe that, individuals like Rader, they construct these, elaborate mental walls in their minds. They separate their, dark desires and actions from their public personas. It's a form of self-deception, a way to, I guess, maintain a sense of normalcy and avoid that, crushing weight of their own guilt.
So they basically live in a world of their own making, where their actions have no consequences.
Yeah, in a sense, they create their own distorted reality, and they're the protagonist, the puppet master, and everyone else is just a pawn in their twisted game.
Which leads us to the legacy of the BTK killer.
Yeah.
How did this case change things, like our understanding of serial killers and the way we catch them?
The BTK case was a turning point for criminal investigation. It showed how important forensic science is becoming, especially DNA technology, for solving crimes. I mean, Rader's arrogance, his belief that a floppy disk couldn't be traced, it just goes to show you how much technology was changing things.
Yeah. And it really made everyone rethink their assumptions about who serial killers are, what they look like.
Yeah.
Rader, he completely shattered that stereotype of the loner, the social outcast. He was, I mean, a pillar of his community, which really makes those lines between good and evil even blurrier.
Totally. The BTK case forced investigators to really refine their profiling techniques. They had to learn to look beyond just the superficial characteristics and delve deeper into the psychology of these offenders. It's a reminder that monsters can be hiding anywhere, and that facade of normalcy, it's a very effective mask.
So what does all this mean for us? What can we take away from this chilling tale of a man who lived a double life for decades?
Well, I think the BTK case is it's a stark reminder that darkness can exist inside seemingly ordinary people, and it teaches us to be aware, to trust our instincts, and to never underestimate the human capacity for deception. But I think it also offers us a glimmer of hope.
Cope in a case like this.
Yeah, hope. Because at the end of the day, Dennis Rader was caught. His web of lies fell apart, and justice, although it was delayed, was served. And it was achieved through the tireless work of law enforcement, the advancements in forensic science, and the courage of a community that refused to be paralyzed by fear.
The case of the BTK killer. It's ambitious. It's a chilling journey into the darkest parts of the human psyche. A story of terror, loss, but also resilience and the pursuit of justice. It's one of those stories that stays with you long after you've, read the last page, leaves you questioning the nature of good and evil, the masks we all wear. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us.